children with a very low standard of evidence. Why? That is our most important piece of our nation. That is our future. If we had a room full of children in here, I would argue that if a threat came into this room, that every person in here would seek to defend those children. They would rush to their aid. Your human instincts would kick in, and you would protect those children. We, as adults, would surround those children and shield them from whatever harm that we saw coming towards them. Not just because you're an adult, but because that is your natural instinct as a human being. To move to action. If you heard a baby crying in the hall right now while I'm talking, all of a sudden what I'm saying is irrelevant. It's not important. All ears and eyes will turn to find out what's happening with this baby. If you heard a woman screaming down the hall, you would do the same thing. You would seek to protect your fellow human being. And what's not happening in our country is there are men and women pleading for help. Their children are pleading for help, but those pleas are being acted out through their behaviors, through emotional and mental and behavioral issues that they're experiencing. The child doesn't understand when they're not seeing their father. They don't know, but they act out on it. The children in these inner city communities whose predominantly fathers are incarcerated in prisons, a lot of what you're seeing is them acting out the behavior because they lack the understanding of what's transpiring in their lives. They don't understand why they don't have a mother there loving and raising them, why mom's working 2 and 3 jobs. They don't understand, why is my dad in prison? They don't understand how the war on drugs facilitated that separation. Just as many children in this nation don't understand how the family law courts are driving a fatherless epidemic in this country because it is a for-profit industry. So make a rebuttable presumption of 50-50 equal shared parenting the national standard. That runs counterintuitive to what we have done. That's the complete opposite of what our country has done for the last 30, 40 years. This every other weekend model and making one parent a visitor to their children and bankrupting them in the process has to end. And I would venture to say what will then transpire over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years is we will increasingly see a reduction in domestic violence. We will see a reduction in conflict in post-marital issues. It's not hard to get onto Google and to find where a mother killed her children, or a father murdered his ex-wife, or a father put a gun in his mouth and killed himself. Doing this will reduce, I'm going to argue, on a very large scale, it will significantly reduce the amount of suicides in this nation. With over 40,000 people a year committing suicide, predominantly middle-aged white men, who are largely, by all arguments, pretty successful guys. I'll give you one example of this. In McHenry County, Illinois, in 2017, there was a gentleman there who ran a small business, a very successful small business, but it was a family-owned small business. They were very successful. In 2 years, I think that it was, he made over 200 court appearances. Over 200. Their company, their small business, was subpoenaed so many times by his ex-wife and her counsel that they had to hire an attorney full-time just to answer the subpoenas. The man's a pillar in his community. He's a father of 4 beautiful children. He was about 53 years old. And 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, they incarcerate this man after he's already paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in child support and alimony, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They incarcerate him for contempt. The judge uses the contempt powers of the court to coerce this man to comply. To purge yourself of your contempt, they say that you have the keys to your future. That when they incarcerate you, that you in fact have the keys to your freedom. You just merely need to comply. And so if you, sir, if I'm the judge and I say you're in contempt of court, you purge yourself of the $10,000 purge I've set for you, you don't get a bail bondsman. You don't get to pay 10% and buy and purchase your freedom. When you're able to use your phone calls through the sheriff's department, and you're able to contact enough people to scrounge up that $10,000 and have it delivered to the court, then you can be set free. In Cook County, Illinois last year, they incarcerated over 1,000 people in the debtors' prisons. Over 1,000. With no right to an attorney, no right to a trial by jury, and no hearing to determine their ability to pay. And with no transcripts, no ability to even access the appeals court. But talk to any attorney in any state, or in any state, and ask them how much it costs to get to the appeals court. Tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. For the judge in the appeal court, just to remand it back, right back to the same judge it just came from. And what do you think they're going to do after you've taken them to the appeals court and try to embarrass them? They're not going to play nice with you. And so you, as a person, do what this gentleman did. You're at the end of your rope. He's sitting in jail for 3 weeks in McHenry County, Illinois. And 3 weeks into his incarceration, he kills himself. That is happening all across this country every single day. Because good men and good women are driven to the point of desperation. When it's your children on the line, and they have systematically destroyed your entire life, and it's your children on the line, where do you go? What's the answer? You don't have one. You run out of options. And those people feel they've no longer got a reason to live. Because they feel like, much like what I do. It's been more than 2 years since I've seen my children. 2 years. The average citizen goes, well, hold on a sec, Cash, you're a retired Navy veteran. You held a top secret clearance. You're not prohibited from being around children. You've never been charged or convicted of any crime. Because these are the questions that first formulate in the average person's mind. What did you do? First question out of people's mouth when I tell them that. What did you do? What makes you assume that I did something? That alone should tell you of the bias that exists within our own minds. Because we don't call into question what's happening inside government, in the judiciary. We trust that somebody who puts on a black robe and they swear an oath and they went to law school, that they're infallible. And we've given them the protections for them to believe that they're infallible. And they're not. It's because we're human beings and because they're fallible that we need transparency. It's because of that that we need accountability. It's because police officers can do the wrong thing and be corrupt. And judges like the one in Pennsylvania can sell children for profit into a for-profit juvenile detention facility. But it takes something that egregious before they're ever held accountable. There's a Supreme Court case out of the state of Texas. A few years ago, there was a criminal trial unfolding, and I don't remember the case, but the judge ordered the police to go and pick up the criminal defense attorney. Wasn't present for court for whatever reason. He went to go pick him up, or the police went to pick him up, but before the police could bring him back, the judge had ordered the police officers to issue a good old police-style beating to the attorney. None of that was disputed. Case goes all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court comes back and says he was acting in his official capacity. He has absolute immunity. Case closed. A sitting judge can order the police to go and pick somebody up and beat them up and then drag them in front of the judge. And the judge has absolute immunity, and the highest court in our nation said that that's okay. They didn't defend the actions. They just said there's nothing you can do to them. Now, when the highest court in the free world is saying that, the highest court is saying that, what do you think is transpiring down here? It's an absolute travesty of what's occurring in this nation. I'm a whistleblower. I'm a father. I'm a veteran. I'm a libertarian. I'm a staunch volunteer for a movement of parents that all they want to do is just raise their kids absent any interference from the state. That's it. not a 10th Amendment states' rights issue. Because a state does not have a right. A government does not have a right. A human being has a right. You have a right to parent your children absent interference from the state unless the state can prove with a clear and convincing standard that you are unfit and an imminent risk to your children. If they cannot do that, then they need to stay the hell out of your business. And the only thing left for them is to ensure that equal protection under the law is upheld and that you as a father or a mother have equal access to raise your children. And you get to make the life choices on whether or not you're going to be involved. For me, if I stayed in the military, having equal custody doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. But should I go 2 years in a nation that I served without seeing my children? No, I shouldn't. Nor should any other parent out there. There are more protections afforded for somebody accused of rape and molestation and murder because those go through a criminal court. These do not. They go through a family court. When the accusations levied at you go through a family court, there is no right to an attorney. There is no right to a trial by jury. There is no right to a record so far as what the court believes. And so I am running, and right now, and people will tell you, if you go to my page, you will see from just this morning that I live stream and I commentate on a Zoom court hearing with the very corrupt judge that has refused to void out 2 orders entered by the previous judge, because if she does, she's an associate judge. She's a junior judge. She's appointed by the circuit judges. And if she doesn't play ball in that courthouse, if family law attorneys don't play ball in that courthouse, they're biting the hand that feeds them. And I've seen enough to know that they will cannibalize their own. If they don't play ball, they're going to cannibalize their own. And the only reason I'm still fighting the way that I am, as successfully as I am, the campaign that I'm railing against the judicial system in my own case, is because I've got a pro bono attorney from a different area of law who's experiencing the same. He's living it himself. And I asked him, when he said, Kash, I'm going to represent you, back in 2018, or I'm sorry, last year, 2019, he says, Kash, I'm going to represent you. I voted for you when you ran for office. I believe in your message. I believe in what you're doing. And he said, and I want to represent you. And as I began to ask him, and learn more about him, and found out he was going through his own personal case, I asked him, I said, Ted, would you fight as vigorously as what you do for me? And he represents multiple men in Illinois pro bono. I said, would you fight the way that you do if you didn't see it and experience it yourself? He said, absolutely not. I wouldn't have set foot in a family law court. I would have continued on with my life. And he was doing great work in his line of work. He was doing great things. He's working with the Trump administration. He's working with trade deals with China. I mean, he's heavily involved. He's doing good work. But his path, much like mine, has been led down a path of seeing our citizens abused at the hands of government and being morally compelled to do something about it despite the risk. At every turn, I'm threatened with incarceration. At every turn. While withholding my children from me. If they can do that to me, not that I deserve any special treatment for my service, I don't. But we've all sought to try and establish a record for ourselves through our lives and the way that we live, through our principles and values, that we should be able to be parents unless they can prove that we're unfit. So when the delegates, whenever they, I believe Mr. Cole here and either Mr. Abernathy or Mr. Joshua Smith, they're going to make a proposition. I can't do it because I'm here as just an educator. But they're doing a good thing. They're bringing a plank to, or an addendum to 1.6. The Libertarian Party, so far as I know, is the only party that has a party plank on parental rights. That should disturb us greatly as well. That only the third largest party, and I would argue the most important party. That if you're a delegate here today, I would implore you to ask questions. And if you so see fit, to move to also have these adopted. So here's the, thanks Chris. So here's the parental rights current plank. 1.6. Parents or other guardians have the right to raise their children according to their own standards and beliefs, provided that the rights of children to be free from abuse and neglect are also protected. But these gentlemen are trying to add some additional teeth to that plank. They're asking that what's added to it is that the Libertarian Party would support a rebuttable equal shared parenting presumption, to end absolute and qualified immunity. And I'm glad you brought this, because it's one other piece that I need to talk about. But to also abolish all federal incentives, including Title IV D and E of the Social Security Act. I'll get into that here in just a second. Complete transparency in all public civil court proceedings, including the ability to record your own hearing. You should be able to walk in there. You should be able to set your phone up and record your proceeding. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And every other person sitting in there should be able to do the same. The federal incentives, I'll talk about those just briefly. Title IV D of the Social Security Act, that is the federal incentives that provides reimbursement and recoupment to the states. For states, and this is another area of expanded government within the states. For the collection of child support, you've got to take one parent and justify the support order. How do you do that? They justify the support order by relegating one parent down with a tremendous reduction in time with the child or children. Because then if mom has, which is the standard, this is the societal standard that we have been accustomed to, mom receives full custody or primary custody somewhere around 80% of the time, 75 to 80% of the time. Dad gets around 25 to 30% of the time and pays child support. The justification by the court is it's in the best interest of the child, which is undefined, and they can use any type of arbitrary reasons that they want to make that custody award. And when the father is paying child support, or the mother, if the mother's paying child support, and the state collects those monies, they report back to the federal government, and I believe that they receive 66 cents, that's the kind of standardized number there, that the state receives in recoupment for collection of child support. But there's other incentives there on their timeliness, on establishing of parentage cases, and we can go down a whole other avenue there of different issues. Paternity fraud that exists, and that's a unique crime to men. And child support collections in debtors' prisons, suspensions of driver's license and professional license. That's what the debtors' prisons I spoke about earlier, where nearly 1,000 people, or over 1,000 people, were incarcerated in the debtors' prisons in Cook County. And if anybody wants that FOIA information, I would be happy to get it and provide it to you. So if you'd like to see it for yourself, I would be happy to get that for you and provide it to you at after this is over. But that system is entirely broken. If we have that rebuttable presumption of equal custody, then the children are going to enjoy maximum involvement of both parents. The conflict. By reducing the conflict, we're going to reduce the emotional and mental and behavioral issues within our children. Doing so reduces the amount of pharmaceuticals that they get. Reducing the amount of pharmaceuticals our children are on, reduce the other effects of these drugs, and it will build a healthier, happier nation. And I think ultimately, that's what we all want to live in. My name is Kash Jackson, and I appreciate you guys and lady for attending.
Yeah.